Resolving your D&D combat on a hex grid takes care of a major flaw of the standard square grid. Let's talk about it. So, whether it's tradition or whatnot, whenever we use a grid to handle our combat in Dungeons & Dragons, it's usually always a square grid. We use hex grids for wilderness encounters, large areas, but maybe we should be using hex grids for everything. Because I have these fun and funky shapes that help with determining cones and shapes of where spells and things go on a square grid. And we even make dungeon tiles square. It's popular, it's easy, but there's a major flaw with using a square grid, moving diagonally. So let's take a look at why using a hex grid can be better and help solve the problem of moving diagonally on a square grid. So we're going to be using Roll20 to help with the demonstrations for this. And here I have Mr. Tony Collette from one of my campaigns. He's a goblin. He's going to help us with the demonstration today. This is, of course, the standard square grid. And if we wanted to move our standard movement, assuming that each square is 5 feet, Tony can move 30 feet. Starting with here with Tony. That's how far he can go. That way, 30 feet. This way, 30 feet. And this way, 30 feet. But what happens if we want to move diagonally? It's counting off 30 feet, but that's clearly a lot farther than this 30 feet. It's measuring out to the same horizontal, but let's double that to 60 feet. And look at the size of that line. It's huge. That's shorter. So this is what happens if we count each diagonal as 5 feet. Now, some people use an alternate method where the first diagonal you move into costs you 5 feet of movement. The second costs you 10 feet of movement. So now, if you've done it this way, you've used 15 feet of your movement. There's another 5, another 10, and that's 30 feet of movement, even though the grid here is saying 20 feet. The distance traveled is almost the same. It's a little bit shorter. But that is obviously a lot longer than that. It's a flawed system. It doesn't work. It's hard to measure. And if you wanted to just, if you weren't using you could, if you're playing online and, you wanted to measure out where your cone goes, it's easy to do on a VTT because then you could just do something like this and go, oh, okay, that's where it all goes. But what do you do if you're on your own table? Well, that's when it becomes a problem and you have to start measuring things out a bit differently. Where here's Tony and he's firing off his cone, and now we have to start looking at this, something like this. And excuse the mess here, but Tony's firing off a cone spell And this is how we have to look at it if we're on our table and not playing on a VTT. That's crude and doesn't look all that great, right? I mean, and it's not entirely accurate either. So let's just get rid of that. But what if we move Tony to a hex grid? Now it's a little bit different. So if we say that each hex is 5 feet, we can move Tony forward. No, not like that. Get the measuring tape. We can move Tony forward his 30 feet, and that's it right there. We can also move Tony on the diagonal 30 feet. And that's going to be exactly the same distance as that 30 feet. Same as here. Now, if we wanted our diagonal movement to be a little bit more awkward, say we go 15 feet that way, and then we can shift another 5 feet. I can't actually, well, we can draw it this way, I guess. If we want Tony to go that, and that, the movement distance is still going to be almost the same as before, but not quite. Now, what about cones and area effect spells? Well, you see how the cone here kind of follows right along the lines of the hexes? This is at a 60-degree angle because hexes are 60 degrees. So you can see that the cone follows right along the vertices of the hexes. And that's a lot more accurate looking and a lot more easier to deal with than, say, you were doing it on a square grid. And we could also stay the same if we're drawing it out because we are on our, say we're on a battle map at our home table. You can still draw it out like this. And just follow the lines into that cone shape. You know, and it works a little bit better, I think. You know, you could, if you wanted to draw your cone a different way, you could follow the vertices like this. That's a narrower cone, obviously, but it's easier to draw that out when you have lines on your paper or your battle mat already there for you to follow. Is any of this making sense? It's making sense to me. But what about area effect spells? Well, say we're gonna plop down a fireball. We can put that here, and this will show us on our square grid the area effect. 30 feet diameter, boom, we know where to go. And that's great, but there are a lot of smaller squares, half squares, part squares all over the place. So what do you do with you're at your home table? Well, again, it's going to be this weird kind of coney thing, you know, like this, which says, okay, these are the full 5x5 squares that your area effect is taken up. It's kind of weird and kind of bizarre and a little cumbersome to manage. On a hex grid, however, it's a little bit more accurate. We can draw our circle out on our VTT like this, and as you can see, there are a lot less partial hexes that are being affected by the area effect spell. You know, even no matter what distance you go out. And then even if you drew it out into that kind of a circular shape, I'll do my best here. I can't. I should have went this way. Right? Yeah. Something like this. You get the idea. I'm not good at drawing, but you will get a much more better circle shape drawn out on a hex grid. I don't know if I've shown you anything, but and maybe it's just my wargamer roots coming through. I don't know, but I find that using a hex grid is kind of better than using squares. It's more accurate, and it certainly solves the movement issue, at least when trying to move diagonally on a square grid. And you know, the quick and easy way to take care of moving diagonally on a square grid, as they put it in the rule books, is to count each square as 5 feet. The alternate method is to count the first square as moving into that square 5 feet, and then moving into the next square 10 feet. Not 5 plus 5, but it cost you 10 feet to move into the second square. Then the third square is 5 feet. The fourth square is 10 feet. That's kind of sort of solves the issue. But if you're counting them out 5 by 5s, that line, that distance becomes greater than if you were moving horizontally or vertically. If you count out 5, 10, 5, 10, 5, 10, 5, 10, eventually that line, that distance line, is shorter than if you were moving horizontally or vertically. It's not accurate, you know, either way you do it. The hex grid takes care of that. You can move straight up and down, and you can move on those diagonals with accuracy. It's the same distance no matter what. And, you know, flanking doesn't become an issue on a hex grid because, you know, hexes are 6 sides, so you've got 3 opposite sides, and you can be flanked 3 ways instead of only 2, which can be fun. And then, of course, you know, mapping out your cones, mapping out your area effects. I don't know, I feel it's easier and makes more sense, you know, whether your cone lines are going along the sides of the hexes or through the vertices. I just feel it works better, you know. Now you may be thinking, okay, well, what if, you know, I'm mapping out a dungeon where walls and everything, they're straight. Well, okay, sure. I can see how that would be an issue for you. But if you were making a corridor that's 5 feet wide and your hexes are 5 feet wide, then you can just have a stack of hexes and then your walls, and you're going to have, you know, partial hexes along the edges of your thing, but you're still going to have those hexes going right down the center of your corridor. Boom, and you can still measure out your 5 feet. Boom, 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 boom. When you get to a room, excuse me, you're still going to have partial hexes around the edges, sure. But I think a good way to take care of this is if that partial hex is showing you, if it's like half of the hex or more, you could count that as a playable space. If it's less than half the hex, then it gets ignored. That's a good way to take care of that too. So I didn't prep a demonstration for that because I, you know, felt it went a little bit beyond this, but it's a way to take care of it, you know. And so yeah, I really do think that a hex grid works better overall for everything, you know. So you know what, give it a try. Try it out. And it's easy to try out if you're using the VTT, of course. You know, you don't have to worry about anything. Boom, there you go. A lot of battle maps that you can get that you write on with the dry erase markers has squares on one side and hexes on the other. Flip it over to the hex side, and try and play resolving out your combat on the hex side. See how that works out for you. You may find that it's easier, and you may find that it makes more sense. So give it a shot. Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and yeah. Also, you can follow me and start playing. I'm hosting a lot of cool games. Thanks. Bye-bye now.